you hep to the jive? Are you hep to the jive? Are you hep, are you hep, are you keeping in step?
Well, hey gang, it is Tony Snipes here from the Portsmouth Shipbuilding Company, and I am coming to you from Unpacking Dieselpunk. This is the live show, so I want to go ahead and jump into it. As you come on in, feel free to add any of your questions and your comments. If you were on the previous show, come on in and do this as well. But I want to jump right into it, starting off where I always like to start off with my personal definition of dieselpunk, because I think it kind of at least gives you some insight as far as where I'm coming from with the genre. So my definition of dieselpunk is that dieselpunk is a method of creativity that combines the historic style of the mid 1910s through about the mid 1950s with elements of sci-fi, fantasy, and even horror. So even as we're going through the questions here, if you have any questions about just my definition of dieselpunk, post them here. Let me see what you think. Some of you may like that definition. Some of you may think that that definition is too broad. Share your thoughts. One of the reasons why I have the definition that I have is because my intent was to, I even challenged myself to describe something where an 8-year-old is able to understand it. If I am able to accomplish that, then at least I think that puts me on the road for making something that can be kind of complex as simple and as easy as possible to get your arms around. So that's why I want to start off with my definition. So post your questions here. Again, this is live. And if you're just checking out the replay, still post your questions here. We'll address those as well. But let's just go ahead and get into it, because I do have some questions that came in earlier leading up to this. The first question that I want to tackle is a big question that I've heard from many of you. And it asks a question, and this is a big one. This is one that's a hot button for me. But it asks the question of, Tony, how do you feel about AI and dieselpunk? Now, those of you that know me and know me well kind of know what my initial feelings are about AI, especially AI art. I hated AI art. I still do not appreciate it when it comes to especially AI art. One main reason for it is just the term itself, AI art. But here's my personal take on it. Here's why I feel the way that I feel. AI, as many of you know, came out of nowhere. Came out like gangbusters. Came out like a virus, because it was something that came on the scene and everybody was like, what is this? And then we started seeing it everywhere, and it was out of control. Now, especially when it comes to us artists. The big beef that I have with AI, especially AI art, is that it was presenting itself, the creators of it were presenting themselves as actual artists. Not as a tool, not as a tool that would help artists, but folks that were coming out of nowhere were presenting themselves as actual artists. Now, my experience had been on Facebook groups that were designed for artists. Excuse me. My experience had been on Facebook groups that have been designed for artists. There's a couple of them that are out there, and I really started, and we were for years creating content, original content, and when I mean content, creating original illustrations and art, posting them on those groups, getting your feedback as an audience member of what you like, what you don't like, what we need to tweak or whatever, but using that as a process and platform for years. Then all of a sudden come these folks that are using AI art, kind of doing the same. You can't hear? Lee, you having trouble with the volume? Okay, Lee says he's having trouble with the volume. Is there any difference now, Lee? Let me know if that's different. Let me know if you can hear all right. I do want to get everybody's either thumbs up, or let me know if you're having trouble with the volume, or if the volume is okay. Because I'm going to go into a lot of information and I don't want to, um, let's see, very low. Okay. Let me see what I can do to tweak that. And if you're able to, do you have on your end, do you have it turned up as much as you can on your end? I'm trying to turn it up here. And I'm trying to see if, let me see if that makes a difference, Lee. Also, if you check your own devices too, then that at least eliminates the fact that it's not the device that you're receiving on, but it's my devices here. Okay, you're all the way up, okay, and it's still low. If somebody else would chime in as well too and let me know if you're having difficulty hearing or if you're hearing okay. I need to know one or the other, and we'll continue on. But one of the things that, getting back to the question about my take on AI and Dieselpunk, the big issue that I had with AI was that it really was presenting itself as the equivalent of traditional art. And what I consider traditional art, I consider even art that's aided by Photoshop as traditional as well too, in this, especially in this case. Mostly because it does take, whether you use those tools of Photoshop or another program or traditional with, without those programs, it still is some true hand-eye coordination that takes place, not a prompt. And folks that were creating images with prompts were positioning themselves as artists. And I had a problem with that. To the point where on one Facebook group, I left. Another Facebook group I was booted out of. And the one that I was booted out of, it was kind of like a quiet booting out of it. In fact, I think it was quiet because I wasn't a jerk. I wasn't, blasting posts all the time. I would just occasionally, every so often, would ask on that Facebook group if somebody posted something I knew was AI, and especially if they did not say that they were AI artists, I would ask the question, what medium did you use? Is this AI? I would ask them, kind of nudge them to confess that this is AI art, especially because they weren't saying otherwise. The thing that rubbed me the wrong way too was the audience responding with telling them that they were so talented, and them just saying thank you, thank you, thank you. Again, that whole rigmarole I had a problem with, and so that was my initial take on AI and especially AI art. Now, where we are today, I still have that same sentiment when it comes to especially AI art. Now, here's the thing that I've done. It's been, I guess, about a year now, a little bit over a year. I can't remember exactly where we are on it, but it's been about that time frame. And coming to grips with that AI is not going anywhere. It's not anything I'm loving and embracing and having over for dinner. But as a strategist, I had said, and I looked at what some others were doing as well too. Two things I'm doing, and two things I encourage artists and especially Dieselpunk artists and creatives to do. First of all, this is the season where we should embrace our uniqueness and promote ourselves as individuals. Because no matter what comes on the scene, AI, whatever the next thing is, it is never going to replace you. So emphasize you and what you do. 50% of what you do itself, what you create, and 50% of you and your personality. One of the reasons why I'm doing this video now is many of you are familiar with my art, as well as me. You kind of, so it's never going to replace you as a creative. The other thing too is, as a shrewd business person, take a look at what this thing, if it has any tools or any elements of it that will actually help your business, especially because it's not going away. An example of what I mean by that is with AI in general, I have found some resources within this whole AI concept that kind of helps me save time on research, helps me save time on creating outlines for ideas and things like that. kind of almost like an editor when it comes to, or an assistant rather. But again, I do not like the way that AI kind of kicked the door down and kind of came into our house. But if that sucker ain't going anywhere, I'm gonna try to make that sucker work for me, and I encourage you to do the same. So tell me your comments, share your comments and your thoughts on your take on especially AI and in the diesel punk world. And while we're at it too, let me know if you're hearing okay. I know Lee had said that he's having trouble with hearing me. I try to adjust it a little bit on my end, and I do want to make sure that everyone, including Lee, is able to hear as well. So if anyone else is listening or watching, in addition to Lee, if you can chime in and let me know that you're either hearing okay or you're having difficulty, one or the other, especially as we continue on. So the next question that I have, and post your questions here as well, but the next question that I want to take on is the question, where's a good one? So I'm going to ask the question, what do you think is the future of Dieselpunk? I think the future of Dieselpunk, well, let me tell you, my thoughts on that have changed. I used to think and feel that that the future of Dieselpunk was going to make it as big as, if not bigger than, let's say, steampunk. Because of, and steampunk, I see it really is embraced. It still is a subgenre of science fiction. However, I still see that steampunk has its, they have their events, they have a lot of like tea parties and things like that. And my hope and my thoughts used to be that Dieselpunk one day will be like that as well. I don't think so now. I think because of the nature of Dieselpunk being so relevant to the mainstream, for example, I am dressed in what I would consider Dieselpunk attire. I can show up for work on Monday with the same attire on, and people would think, hey, great tie, great suspenders, and not think it is a particular genre of something like a steampunk, which is okay. I love the fact that that's the nature of our genre. I think because of that, it's not going to be as big as I wanted it to be. However, I do think, especially with us, with you creators, you writers, you artists, all of you storytellers, I think because of the tools that we have access to more and more and more every day, I think there lies the future of Dieselpunk, where all of us that are storytellers in one form or another, the barrier of us having access to these resources to tell our stories in whatever platform we choose and whatever works for us as far as how we do it, we can do it more and more now than ever before. So I do encourage all of my creators that are here to get out there and make the stuff. If you have ideas about, Dieselpunk stories and video and movies, especially film. We've talked a lot about film, and everybody wants to see something as a film, to do it more. Lee says he's currently working on a project using handmade miniatures, photographed and embellished in Photoshop for atmospheric effects. Phenomenal, Lee. Thank you for sharing that, because I didn't know. I knew that you were an audience member, and I also was wondering, were you a creative as well? This is great to see. This is an example of what I feel is the future of Dieselpunk. More of us not only being able to create what we do, but now the tools that we have to get the word out to even more, because there's so many of us that love this genre, and we're starting to discover each other. I think the more we do it and do things like this, that's the future of Dieselpunk, where we're going to increase our reach with the access that we have with these tools. So Lee, thank you for sharing that. So another question that someone has asked, and feel free to post your questions here live, but a question that was asked was, here's a cool one that's over here. Oh, I like this one. Sean, from my friends that are over at the Weird World War II group. Hey guys, Good to hear from you guys. Thank you, Sean, for asking this question. I hang out with those guys every week. They tolerate my post every week, so thank you. Sean had asked, maybe you've addressed this in the past, but would there have been a development for the gases used in the airships, talking about dirigibles and blimps and things like that? Would there have been development for the gases used in the airships, given the instability of hydrogen and the limited availability of helium? So Sean's question, I remember seeing your question, and Sean asked basically in Dieselpunk, in that genre where there had been a lot of use of hydrogen, would there have been a development into helium? 2 points on that question, Sean. First of all, I like to always say that it's always up to the creative, whoever is the storyteller, what they decide to do. The second part of this question, though, I think is a bigger point, is that I think that's where the creative has that opportunity to research history or become familiar with history and incorporate that in their story. Now, let me give you a great example of someone that's done that. And if I'm not mistaken, Todd Downing, who has been interviewed here on episode 4, I think it was, if it wasn't episode 3. But Todd Downing, who is the author of the Airship Data List series, if I'm not mistaken, I think Todd had mentioned in one of his, at least a radio program version of his storytelling, that the airship data list is actually utilizing helium. Then they transition from hydrogen, and so that's why it is actually a test vessel. And I like the fact that he addressed that real world situation and scenario and incorporates that in his storyline. And I emphasize that because that's what I think is the value of us storytellers that are retro-futuristic storytellers, is because even though we're telling fantastic stories and fictional stories, we have that historical backdrop, and it kind of encourages and forces us to do a little bit of research, whether a little or a lot, but it encourages us to become familiar with the actual material or the actual history, and then take that history with what we've learned and utilize it as we see fit. So great question, Sean. Again, I think it's up to the creative. For example, with my world that I've created, the Portsmouth Aeroship Building Company, we actually go in a totally different direction where we've created the gravitational displacement technology. Now, we have an awareness of the existing technology in the history, but then we just added this new thing, and it still forced me to do a little bit of research. Not a whole lot, because I'm not an engineer, but the cool thing about this whole thing is that with us knowing in our audiences that there will be folks that raise their hand and ask these type of questions, for us to have some form of readiness to be able to address those questions and to kind of, go in the direction that we see fit as creatives, but having an awareness of having done a little bit of reading and research, which is, I think, what's cool about how what we do can now be embraced in the school systems. For example, those of you that are familiar with, it used to be called STEM. Now some of them are calling STEAM education, where it's science, technology, engineering, the arts, and mathematics, and how we use that creative. They actually said that it really now ties into critical thinking, where we don't just do an answer just to say, hey, it's magic. We actually had to do some type of thinking, a little bit of research to get to that answer. And what we do as creative storytellers with Dieselpunk fits right into that educational style of STEAM education. So great question, Sean. Great question. Let's see, any other live questions coming through? Feel free to jump on in. And so with the questions that came in ahead of time, another one that I want to tackle is from Irish Flyboy. Irish Flyboy asked the following question: what do you think has kept major production companies from exploring this genre further, meaning diesel punk as a genre? He further asks and says, there are clear heroes and bad guys. He means mobsters, cults, and even corrupt officials, along with the Nazis and the scientists. He further asks the question, is it too simplistic to say that the genre overall isn't profitable enough in their eyes to bring to the mainstream audiences again? So I'm glad that you asked that question, Flyboy. And my question is, Lee, I see your question. We're going to tackle that in a minute. So why isn't Hollywood doing more diesel punk movies or diesel punk shows? I'll say this. One thing that we all have seen as a trend is I think that they are, and maybe this is the tail end of that wave, but they're looking at so many reboots. I think because it's easy to sell. If you take a previous show or previous movie and you kind of check that box and you're presenting it and saying that you know everybody used to love whatever that previous show or movie was, that checks one box. Then the next thing is they're saying, okay, we're going to do this take on it. I don't think Hollywood even realizes that there is a real genre or subgenre of science fiction called diesel punk. They may kind of stumble across it like they did in the recent Godzilla Minus One, which great story, great retelling of that story, and great approach with it. I think it just happens to be diesel punk. I think the future of Hollywood doing that is they're going to go with the easiest thing to sell, and that may not be, that's going to be hit or miss with our genre. I think that also at the same time creates the opportunity, again, for us creatives that love doing this style, for us to run with it within whatever it is, whatever your platform is, whether you're a filmmaker, whether you are a writer, whether you're an illustrator like myself, to run with the ideas that we've had, because it's not because there's a desire for it, but there's not anything major or a major push coming from Hollywood to do anything with it. Let's us run with it. But I don't think I think one main reason why Hollywood does what it's going to do is because they're going with the easiest route to get it greenlit, to get a sale. And at least right now we've seen that had mostly been in reboots. So Lee, the question that you have, do you plan on following up with more action in the series? Big yes on that, Lee. And if you're referring to action as in the illustrations, because you know mostly what I do are the illustrated works, I'm going to do more work where that shows the aeroships in battle, to show them in action. Here's one reason for that, or a couple reasons for that. A couple of the works that I've done that show the aeroships in battle, when I've taken them out to the Comic Con, shout out to SC Comic Con in South Carolina, the audience where I get to interact with the audience face to face, you guys love it. You guys love it. So, and you guys love it online as well too. So, and I've actually told those of you that I've talked to face to face that I'm going to do more of these. The reason why I've been doing them is because you asked for them. Many of you said that, yeah, we love what you're doing by just kind of showcasing the ships and showcasing the people, but we would love to see these ships in action. And when I stepped out and did a couple of those, you guys said, oh, we love it. Give us more. And so, yes, to answer your question, Lee, I plan to do more. Let's take on another question that came in prior to this broadcast and take on any questions that you guys have here live. The next question is, oh, this is a good one. Straw Bunyan had asked the question, where do you draw the line between, because it looks cool, quote, and function? Where do you draw the line between having something looking cool and having something functional? That's that fine tightrope that I think creatives, especially diesel punk creatives, need to walk. That's the challenge that I welcome. I have told folks again back to Comic Con when I've had a chance to talk with folks face to face and just kind of have them get to know me a little bit more. I let them know that I challenge myself. That's one of the things I have to challenge my creativity to make. I want to make something that looks cool and fascinating, but I still need to answer that question that some of you, especially my engineer friends, you know who you are. You're the ones that raise your hand and say, well, how can they do this without, this X, Y, and Z thing? So you guys keep me on my toes. That's what forces us creatives to do a little research, to not just say, oh, it's magic, to also have at least address the question. Again, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a tech guy, I'm not an engineer, but I have been forced to at least do a little bit of research, do a little bit of reading, and take what I uncovered and do something with it or not. But that's what I think is great about this genre because, and it's one of the things I think separates the diesel punk style from steampunk. With steampunk, nothing against steampunk, I love it. Uh, we've talked about this here before. It does have a tendency to have a lot of the stuff that is decorative and not as functional. Um, Cogs, clocks, and stuff all over things, but they don't really have any true function. You don't see that as much in the diesel punk world, and I like that. Now, let me give you a personal example of when I had to challenge myself and decide on design based on functionality. Many of you are familiar with my aerocycles, and those flying motorcycles. Key thing about it is they don't have a windshield, and so I had to address that. These things don't have a windshield, so what does that mean? Um, to me, as I described, they're function a little bit more. They're not as high altitude flying as the major ships. They fly a little lower. They're a little bit more nimble. But one thing I also did that opened up a design and creative opportunity for me is that I call them the aerocycle jockeys, basically the pilots. Their helmets are elaborate because of the lack of the windshield. So even though there was one design thing that wasn't there, it opened up a design opportunity for something else. But I had to go there, and that's the fun part of the creative process. So great question that you asked there, Straw Bunyan, about where do you draw the line between it looks cool and the functionality. We should take that on and should have fun with it. And if we at least address it, then we do it well. Now, one thing I don't think we have to get caught up in, and with me not being an engineer, I'm not going to get caught up in it because I mean it's not my, it's not where I come from as far as engineering. How do things work down to the letter and to the detail? That's the fun of it being fantastic. We have to have that room for what they say, the crisis of the area where you kind of dispel it and say, you know what, it's fantasy, but still being able to kind of acknowledge that yes, those aerocycles don't have windshields. That's why we have the helmets that we have, things like that. Hope that answered that question. Let's see, is there another question here? Lee says, helium and hydrogen have different lift capabilities. All fiction writers have the functionality issue when writing. Yes, that's a great point that you made there, Lee. And yes, with us having to have those things that we have as an issue, we should approach them, read a little bit, research a little bit, and then take what we create and make it happen. The next question here that I'll address is, this is a question that as I get ready to wrap all of this up, I want to leave this question to you, the audience members, because I really want you to chime in, especially if you are chiming in on the replay. I want you to address this question. Somebody had asked me before, and I think I tackled it at the beginning of this here, but I really wanted to leave it for our public too. What do you think is the future of Dieselpunk? Now, I addressed it here. One of the things I think is the future of Dieselpunk is that it's not going to grow as big as maybe steampunk or anything larger than that. However, I think that many of us creatives have more access to resources than ever before. But I want to ask you, what do you feel is the future of Dieselpunk? Share your thoughts and your comments and your questions here. Lee asked the question, what kind of weapons do your sub hunter use? Um, the sub hunter, if you're referring to the one, yes, the one that actually searches for the U-boats, the Nazi U-boats, they actually are equipped with with um, depth charges, just like ships were. They're low flying, and I'll post in the replay. I'll post a an illustration of those U-boat hunters, those sub hunters. But they do float over the water. They're low flying. They have zero turn capability, and as far as being able to be aggressors, they're equipped with depth charges as well as guns that they have on top of it. Great question, Lee, and thank you for following my content to even know about that vessel. So, gang, as we wrap this up, I want to thank you for joining for this episode, especially the live episode. I do apologize for the time change on this, but I especially want to welcome everybody for the replay, because even if you didn't get to join me live, post your question and your comment here, because we still will address it as they come on through. And I do want to leave you guys with a question. I want everybody to answer that question. What do you feel is the future of Dieselpunk? Thank you guys for joining us. Big thanks to Lee for being active on our conversation today. We will have other episodes, a few more episodes coming up. We've got 2 episodes left. This is episode 6 in the series of Unpacking Dieselpunk. So stay tuned for the next one, but continue to enjoy the questions and the comments here in the replay. I want to thank you, and I'll talk to you soon. Oh, you have to the jive.